The night was supposed to be perfect for Ryan Mitchell. Dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, he walked into the most exclusive restaurant in New York with Vanessa Brooks, the woman he had left his wife for. Laughter and champagne filled the air. Everyone admired them, the successful businessman and the daughter of a wealthy real estate tycoon. Ryan believed he had finally won the life he always wanted. He thought he had buried his past for good. But fate had other plans. As Ryan leaned in to whisper into Vanessa's ear, his eyes suddenly froze on a figure across the room. A waitress walked carefully between tables, her steps a little slower, her body wrapped in a modest black dress that could not hide the unmistakable curve of pregnancy. Her hair, once so familiar, was tied back simply. And then she turned. It was Emily, the woman he had divorced just 7 months earlier, the wife he had discarded like she was nothing more than a burden. Ryan's heart dropped into his stomach as his eyes locked on hers. For a brief second, the restaurant around him blurred into silence. All he could see was her face, pale, tired, but still carrying that quiet strength he once ignored, and her belly, round, undeniable, proof of the life growing inside her. Vanessa noticed his expression and frowned. "Ryan, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice sharp, but Ryan couldn't answer. His mind spun wildly. Pregnant? 7 months after divorce? Could it be his? The memories came rushing back. Their last night together, filled with anger, tears, and then desperate passion before papers were signed and lawyers tore their lives apart. Ryan had believed it was the end. He had convinced himself she would fade away quietly. But now, standing across the restaurant, Emily looked like the ghost of his past, carrying a secret that could destroy his future. Every whisper in the room suddenly felt like it was about them. Vanessa's hand tightened on his arm, but Ryan barely noticed. His chest burned with a mix of fear, guilt, and something darker, regret. The baby might be his, and if the world found out, his perfect new image would collapse. Emily didn't say a word. She simply held her tray, her eyes glistening but calm, before turning away to serve another table. Yet that one glance had already shattered Ryan's carefully built life. He realized in that instant, everything he thought he controlled was about to slip from his hands, and he had no idea how devastating the truth would become. Emily Carter had never dreamed of wealth, fame, or power. All she ever wanted was a quiet life filled with love, stability, and family. Born in a small town in Pennsylvania, she grew up in a modest home where her father worked as a mechanic and her mother ran a small bakery. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that sense of warmth shaped Emily into a gentle, selfless woman. After college, Emily moved to New York City to work as an elementary school teacher. Her life was simple, but she loved it. She adored her students, often staying late to help them with homework or buying supplies with her own paycheck when the school budget ran out. Friends described her as the girl who always put others first. But beneath that kindness was a woman who secretly longed for a love story of her own. That love story seemed to arrive when she met Ryan Mitchell. He was charming, ambitious, and full of promises. Their romance began with whirlwind dates, rooftop dinners, late-night walks in Central Park, handwritten notes left on her doorstep. For the first time, Emily felt like she had found someone who saw her worth. Ryan spoke of building a life together, of creating a future where she wouldn't have to struggle. They married after just a year of dating. Emily believed she was living her fairy tale. She devoted herself entirely to Ryan, cooking his favorite meals, supporting his long hours, sacrificing her own dreams so he could chase his career. She told herself that was what love meant: compromise, patience, loyalty. When cracks appeared, his criticism, his long business trips, the growing distance, she ignored them, clinging to the hope that the man she fell in love with was still there. The breaking point came when Ryan grew close to Vanessa Brooks, the glamorous daughter of a wealthy real estate mogul. Emily noticed the expensive gifts he brought home, the way he avoided her eyes, the sharp words when she asked simple questions. And then, one morning, she was handed divorce papers. No warning, no discussion, just cold signatures that ended 3 years of marriage. Emily's world collapsed overnight. She lost not only her husband, but also the apartment they had shared, the stability she had fought so hard to build. With nowhere else to go, she rented a small, run-down one-bedroom apartment in Queens. She returned to teaching, but the loneliness followed her everywhere. Nights were the worst, lying awake in bed, replaying every moment of her marriage, asking herself what she had done wrong. It was during those dark weeks that she discovered she was pregnant. The test shook in her trembling hands as tears streamed down her face. A part of her wanted to call Ryan, to tell him, to hope for a shred of humanity in him, but another part knew better. This was the man who had already chosen another woman. She could not give him another chance to destroy her. So Emily made the decision to raise the child alone. It terrified her, but it also gave her purpose. Every morning, as she looked in the mirror, she whispered to herself, "You are stronger than you think." She worked double shifts, cut corners, and saved every dollar. She carried the weight of both mother and father, even when exhaustion threatened to break her. Her students noticed her softer glow. Her colleagues admired her quiet resilience. But Emily hid her struggles carefully, never letting anyone see the full extent of her pain. The secret of her pregnancy remained locked away, known only to her doctor and a single trusted friend. She believed she could keep the secret forever, that Ryan would never know. But destiny had other plans, and the night he saw her belly for the first time would ignite a storm neither of them could escape. The city of New York was always alive, buzzing like a restless heart that never stopped beating. For Emily, though, it felt like two different worlds existed within the same streets. On one side were the glittering skyscrapers, rooftop parties, charity galas, and high-class restaurants where Ryan now lived with Vanessa, bathed in luxury. On the other side were her own days, quiet, exhausting, filled with the sounds of children's laughter in her classroom and the silence of her tiny rented apartment in Queens. The contrast could not have been more cruel. Ryan Mitchell had made himself into a rising star among the city's elite. Since his divorce, he flaunted his connection to Vanessa's powerful family, attending fundraisers where the champagne never stopped flowing and the lights never dimmed. He hosted business dinners at Amaretto, the most expensive restaurant in Manhattan, where each plate cost more than Emily's weekly groceries. Society pages began printing his photos again. His arm confidently wrapped around Vanessa's waist, their smiles rehearsed but convincing. To the outside world, he had upgraded his life. Emily, on the other hand, avoided those same streets. She lived in the shadows, working quietly, keeping her secret. But destiny has a cruel way of dragging people together in the very places they least expect. It happened on a Friday night, at a restaurant neither of them should have been in together. Ryan was there with Vanessa, seated at a corner table with city investors, laughing louder than usual, showing off his perfect new life. He thought the evening would end with business deals and whispered promises. Emily was there because she needed extra cash. The pregnancy was expensive. Doctor visits, vitamins, preparing for a baby on her own. Teaching barely covered the rent, so she took part-time shifts as a server. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. She didn't know Ryan would be there. If she had known, she never would have walked through those doors. The restaurant itself was breathtaking. Gold chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, and velvet curtains softened the glow of candlelight. Couples in gowns and tuxedos filled the room, each one representing power, wealth, and influence. To them, this was just another evening of indulgence. To Emily, it was survival. She moved carefully, balancing trays of wine glasses, ignoring the ache in her back and the heaviness in her feet. When she turned, her world collided with Ryan's. For Ryan, it was as if time itself stopped. The glamorous facade of his night cracked in an instant as his eyes landed on Emily. He didn't just see a server, he saw the curve of her belly, unmistakable and undeniable. 7 months. His mind raced. The timing, the last night they were together before the divorce, couldn't be ignored. The setting became the stage of a silent war. Guests continued laughing, clinking glasses, but Ryan's chest tightened, and Vanessa's smile faltered as she followed his gaze. Emily, though shaken, forced herself to continue walking, tray in hand, pretending he didn't exist. Yet she knew, deep down, that the fortress of silence she had built around her secret was beginning to crumble. The restaurant had turned into more than just a place to serve food and close deals. It was now the battlefield of past and present colliding, the backdrop where betrayal, regret, and truth stood ready to erupt. And when Emily's eyes met Ryan's across the room, neither of them could escape what was coming, because this restaurant would become the place where Ryan's perfect world began to fall apart. Ryan Mitchell was a man who knew how to play roles. To the public, he was the picture of success, ambitious, confident, the kind of man who could walk into any room and immediately command attention. But behind that polished smile was a darker truth, one Emily had learned too late. Ryan had always been hungry, not for love, but for status. He came from a middle-class family that scraped to get by. Growing up, he despised the way his parents argued over bills and envied the classmates who wore designer clothes. He swore that one day he would never feel small again. That vow shaped every decision he made as an adult. Money wasn't just about comfort, it was proof of his worth. When he met Emily, she represented warmth and stability. She loved him without conditions, something he had never experienced before. At first, that unconditional love felt intoxicating, but soon it began to feel like a cage. He didn't want to be reminded of his roots. He wanted to rise higher, faster, to be seen in the company of the powerful. Emily's modest salary, her humble lifestyle, her quiet nature, they all became irritations to him. Enter Vanessa Brooks. Vanessa was everything Emily was not. She was the daughter of Thomas Brooks, a man whose real estate empire spanned half the city. Born into luxury, Vanessa carried herself with a confidence that came from never knowing the weight of survival. She was glamorous, connected, and ruthless. For Ryan, she was not just a lover. She was a ticket to the life he believed he deserved. Their affair started quietly. Business meetings, casual dinners, stolen moments that Emily never saw coming. Vanessa, sharp and calculating, knew exactly what she was doing. She whispered into Ryan's ear about the kind of man he could become with her by his side. She painted pictures of penthouses, yachts, and influence beyond imagination. Ryan listened, hungry for every word. Emily's love suddenly felt small compared to Vanessa's promises of power. The decision to leave his wife was not difficult for Ryan. In his mind, he was upgrading. He told himself Emily would survive. She was strong, she'd find her way. But the truth was simpler. He didn't care. He was already chasing the next stage of his climb, intoxicated by Vanessa's world of glittering parties and endless wealth. Vanessa, however, did not love Ryan in the way Emily once had. To her, Ryan was ambitious, charming, and useful. He was handsome enough to stand beside her at events and clever enough to advance her father's business interests. But love? That was not in her vocabulary. She saw Ryan as a project to mold, a partner who would bow to her influence while basking in her family's fortune. Together, they became a power couple in the eyes of society. But beneath the glamorous photos and champagne smiles was a toxic bond built on greed and appearances. Ryan ignored the whispers of doubt that sometimes echoed in his mind, whispers of Emily's steady love, of the home they once shared. He buried those thoughts under expensive suits and designer cufflinks, pretending he was finally the man he always wanted to be. But that illusion cracked the night he saw Emily again. Because in that single glance, Vanessa also noticed the truth. She saw his eyes fix on the pregnant woman carrying a tray, and she understood instantly who Emily was. Jealousy, sharp and poisonous, flickered across her face. And for the first time, Ryan realized Vanessa might not be the safe haven he had imagined. Because when power, jealousy, and secrets collide, even the strongest alliances can shatter. The restaurant's golden lights glimmered like stars, but to Emily, it felt like standing under a harsh spotlight. She carried her tray with steady hands, though her heart pounded so hard it echoed in her ears. She had spent months avoiding Ryan, months building a fragile life where his face was only a ghost in her memory. And yet, here he was, alive, smirking, and staring at her swollen belly like the truth had just ripped the ground from beneath him. She wanted to disappear. But fate gave her no such mercy. Ryan rose from his chair, Vanessa clutching his arm, her eyes sharp and curious. "Emily," Ryan said loudly, too loudly. Heads began to turn at the sound of her name. She froze, every step heavy with dread. The tray in her hands trembled as the room fell into a hush. Investors, socialites, strangers, they were all watching, sensing a scandal about to unfold. Vanessa tilted her chin, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is your ex-wife? The one you said was weak?" She let her gaze drop deliberately to Emily's belly. "Seems she didn't waste much time, did she?" The words cut like a knife. Emily's cheeks burned as whispers erupted around the room. She could hear them. She's pregnant? Who's the father? Was she hiding? Every hushed speculation swirled through the air like daggers, stabbing her dignity. Ryan's face twisted with something between anger and panic. "Whose child is that, Emily?" he demanded. His voice, once intimate, now carried across the room, cruel and accusing. "Tell everyone. Whose baby are you carrying?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream that it was his, that he had abandoned her when she needed him most. But the humiliation was unbearable. Every eye in the restaurant waited for her response. Her secret, the one she had fought so hard to protect, dangled on the edge of exposure. "I don't owe you an explanation," she whispered, but her voice shook. Vanessa laughed, sharp and victorious. "Of course she won't say. Women like her always trap men with lies." She leaned closer to Ryan, loud enough for the room to hear. "You were right to leave her." The laughter from Vanessa, the silence from the crowd, the weight of Ryan's stare, it all pressed down on Emily until she could barely breathe. She lowered the tray to the nearest table, her hands trembling. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to escape the walls closing in. But before she could move, Ryan stepped closer. His voice dropped, but the malice was clear. "If that baby is mine, Emily, you'll regret keeping it from me." The words shattered her. She clenched her jaw, fighting back tears, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. But inside, her heart crumbled. In that moment, she wasn't just Emily the teacher, or Emily the ex-wife. She was a woman stripped bare in front of strangers, judged, mocked, betrayed. The humiliation was complete, and yet, somewhere deep inside, a spark flickered. A quiet voice whispered that she would not always be powerless. Emily lifted her chin, forcing herself to meet Ryan's eyes. She said nothing, but the look in her gaze carried a promise he would never forget. Because this night, this very humiliation, would one day be the reason she rose stronger than ever. And Ryan had no idea that someone else in that restaurant was watching, someone who would change Emily's life forever. The humiliation at the restaurant clung to Emily like a second skin. Long after she slipped out the back door, away from the whispers and cruel laughter, the words still echoed in her ears. "Whose baby are you carrying?" Ryan's voice had been like a knife, cutting through the fragile walls she had built around herself. And Vanessa's mocking laugh, sharp, venomous, was now engraved into her memory. Emily stumbled into the cold night air, her breath clouding in front of her. The city lights blurred as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She tried to steady herself, gripping her belly protectively as if shielding her unborn child from the cruelty of the world. "It's okay, baby," she whispered through sobs. "Mommy's here. Mommy won't let them hurt you." But the truth was, Emily was breaking. She found herself wandering aimlessly, the sounds of honking taxis and chatter fading into a dull roar. Her feet carried her through streets she barely registered. All she could feel was the weight of shame pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. When she finally reached her tiny apartment, she collapsed onto the couch, burying her face into her hands. The tears wouldn't stop. She cried until her body shook, until her throat was raw and her eyes burned. She had survived the divorce. She had endured the loneliness. But tonight had ripped her open in ways she never imagined. The man who once swore to love her had not only abandoned her, he had turned her existence into a public spectacle. "Why wasn't I enough?" she whispered into the silence. The apartment offered no answer. The peeling wallpaper, the buzzing fridge, the single lamp in the corner, all of it bore witness to her despair. She pressed her palms against her swollen belly, feeling the faint kick beneath her skin. That tiny flutter should have been a comfort, a reminder of the life she was fighting for. But tonight, even that wasn't enough to stop the crushing wave of hopelessness. For the first time, Emily allowed herself to wonder if she could do this. Could she raise a child alone? Could she endure the stares, the whispers, the judgment? Every insecurity she had buried rose to the surface, screaming at her that she wasn't strong enough. She curled onto the couch, clutching a pillow like a lifeline. Her breaths came in ragged sobs. Images of Ryan's face, twisted with accusation, played in her mind over and over. His threat, "If that baby is mine, you'll regret keeping it from me," haunted her. The man she once loved had become her tormentor, and there was no escaping him. Hours passed. The city outside continued to live, but inside that tiny apartment, Emily's world felt frozen. Exhaustion finally pulled her into a restless sleep, though even in her dreams, the humiliation replayed like a cruel film. When morning came, the sunlight streaming through the window felt almost offensive. She dragged herself to the bathroom, staring into the mirror. Her reflection shocked her. Swollen eyes, pale skin, the look of a woman who had been crushed. For a moment, she didn't recognize herself. "This isn't me," she whispered. But the mirror didn't lie. She sank onto the bathroom floor, arms wrapped tightly around her belly, tears threatening again. She was tired of fighting, tired of pretending to be strong. For the first time, Emily thought about giving up, not on the baby, but on herself. Maybe Ryan was right. Maybe she was nothing without him. Her phone buzzed on the counter, snapping her out of the spiral. A message flashed across the screen from an unknown number. "You don't have to go through this alone. Meet me tonight." Emily's breath caught. Her hands trembled as she read the words again. Someone knew her secret, and they were about to step into her shattered world. Emily stared at the message glowing on her phone screen, her heart pounding. "You don't have to go through this alone. Meet me tonight." The number was unfamiliar, but the words carried a strange comfort, as if someone out there saw her pain when the rest of the world only mocked it. She debated ignoring it. After all, she had been burned before. Trust had cost her everything, but a part of her, the part desperate for hope, couldn't let it go. With trembling hands she typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came almost instantly. "Someone who saw what happened last night, 7 p.m. at the cafe on 5th Avenue. Please come." Emily's instinct screamed caution, but loneliness and exhaustion pushed her forward. By evening, she found herself sitting in the corner of the cafe, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea she could barely taste. Every time the door opened, her chest tightened. What if it was Ryan? What if it was a trap? But then he walked in, Daniel Harrington. She recognized him instantly. He was a name she had only seen in newspapers and business magazines. The CEO of Harrington Enterprises, a billionaire known for his philanthropy as much as his ruthless success. But seeing him in person was different. He wasn't surrounded by cameras or bodyguards. He walked in quietly, wearing a simple coat, his gaze steady and kind. "Emily?" he asked softly, approaching her table. She blinked in shock. Why would you reach out to me?" Daniel took the seat across from her, his expression gentle. "Because I was there. I saw what Ryan did to you last night, and I couldn't walk away." Emily's throat tightened. Shame washed over her again. But Daniel leaned forward, his voice firm. "You don't deserve what happened. You don't deserve to carry this weight alone." For the first time in months, someone spoke to her not with pity, not with judgment, but with genuine compassion. She tried to look away, embarrassed, but Daniel's gaze didn't waver. "You're pregnant," he said softly, almost like a statement of strength rather than weakness. "And you're stronger than you realize. I know what Ryan is like. Men like him think they can step on anyone to climb higher, but I've seen women like you rise, Emily, and I can help." Her mind spun. Why would a man like Daniel, wealthy, powerful, untouchable, care about her? She shook her head. "I don't want charity. I can't be someone's pity project." Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile. "This isn't charity, it's respect. You faced humiliation and still stood tall. That's more strength than most people in Ryan's world will ever have. I admire that." Tears threatened to spill again, but this time they weren't from despair. They were from the sudden, fragile spark of hope. For so long she had carried the weight alone, but Daniel's words cracked something open inside her. Still, doubt lingered. "Why would you risk anything for me? You don't even know me." Daniel leaned back, his expression turning serious. "Because I know men like Ryan, and I know the damage they leave behind, but there's something else you need to know." Emily's breath caught. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Ryan is not as secure as he pretends. His business deals with Vanessa's family aren't as solid as he shows. In fact, he's in debt, deep debt, and the truth about you and that baby could destroy everything he's trying to build." Emily's heart raced. The humiliation, the pain, it all suddenly looked different. She wasn't powerless. She held the very secret that could shatter Ryan's empire. Daniel leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "Ryan thinks he won last night, but Emily, the game is just beginning, and you have far more power than you realize." Emily's hands trembled around her cup. For months, she had been drowning in shame. Now, for the first time, she saw the possibility of rising. And yet, Daniel's words carried an unspoken warning. Because if Ryan discovered that she now had an ally with power of his own, the fight ahead would turn into a war. For days after meeting Daniel, Emily couldn't stop replaying his words. "You have far more power than you realize." They echoed in her mind like a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of despair. For months, she had been walking through life like a shadow, carrying shame and loneliness as if they were chains around her wrists. But now, a crack of light had formed. She started small. The morning after their meeting, Emily stood in front of her mirror longer than usual. For months, she had avoided her reflection, unable to look at the pale, exhausted woman staring back at her. But this time, she forced herself to look. Her belly had grown, round and undeniable. The woman in the mirror looked fragile, yes, but not broken. There was strength in the lines of her face, a quiet determination in her eyes. For the first time, she whispered to her reflection, "You're not done yet." Daniel kept his promise. Over the next week, he called to check on her, sent groceries to her apartment, and quietly arranged for her to see a better doctor. He never pushed, never pitied her. He simply reminded her that she wasn't alone. That reminder became fuel. Emily began walking every morning, not just for her health, but to clear her mind. The city streets that once felt suffocating slowly became hers again. She held her head higher, shoulders straighter. At school, her students noticed the change. "Miss Carter, you're smiling more," one child said shyly. She realized she was. But transformation wasn't just about appearance. It was about mindset. Emily had spent too long hiding, apologizing for existing. Now she began to reclaim herself piece by piece. She dug out her old notebooks, the ones filled with lesson plans, dreams of starting her own literacy program for underprivileged children. She had buried those dreams during her marriage to Ryan, when every ambition was dismissed as small or unimportant. Late at night, she began writing again. Ideas, goals, visions for the future. Each word on the page was an act of defiance, a declaration that her life wasn't over. Still, fear lingered. She knew Ryan. She knew the way he used power to crush anyone who threatened him. But she also knew something else now. He wasn't untouchable. His debts, his lies, his image, they were fragile. And Emily realized she had the one truth that could crack his perfect facade wide open. Daniel encouraged her without dictating her choices. "You don't have to strike yet," he told her one evening over the phone. "But prepare yourself. Ryan will come for you. And when he does, you need to be ready, not just to defend yourself, but to win." The words sank deep. For so long, Emily had been surviving. Now she was learning to fight. She changed her wardrobe. Gone were the faded sweaters and worn shoes she had clung to after the divorce. Slowly, she began investing in herself again. Dresses that flattered her growing figure, shoes that made her stand taller, colors that spoke of confidence instead of fear. She wasn't dressing for Ryan. She wasn't dressing for Vanessa. She was dressing for herself and for the woman she was becoming. Even her voice changed. At school, in the market, with neighbors, she spoke more firmly, no longer shrinking into silence. She was still kind, still gentle, but there was a new edge to her tone, a quiet authority that couldn't be ignored. And with every step forward, she thought of the baby inside her. "I will not let you be born into shame," she whispered one night, resting her hands on her belly. "You will know your mother fought for you. You will know we were stronger than him." But as Emily rose, so did the storm. Because Ryan had not forgotten the look in her eyes at the restaurant, the defiance hidden beneath her humiliation. And while Emily was preparing to fight back, Ryan was already plotting a move that could destroy everything she was rebuilding. The invitation came unexpectedly. Emily had almost thrown it away, thinking it was a cruel mistake. But there it was, printed in gold ink, Annual Brooks Foundation Gala, an evening of elegance. Vanessa's family's event. Emily's hands trembled as she held the thick card. This was the kind of gala Ryan lived for, the kind of night where his entire world, investors, socialites, and power brokers, gathered to celebrate themselves. She had no business stepping foot into that world anymore. And yet, Daniel's voice echoed in her mind. "Ryan will come for you. Be ready, not just to defend yourself, but to win." That night, Emily made a decision. She would no longer hide. Daniel arranged everything quietly. A dress, tailored to her figure, elegant but commanding. A stylist who gave her hair soft waves instead of the plain bun she used to wear. A car to pick her up, sleek and black, waiting outside her tiny apartment like a chariot. As Emily looked at her reflection before leaving, she barely recognized herself. She wasn't the broken woman who had cried on her bathroom floor. She was radiant, glowing, not just with pregnancy, but with strength. Her hand rested gently on her belly as she whispered, "Tonight, we show him." The gala was held at the Metropolitan Grand, a palace of crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Reporters lined the red carpet, cameras flashing as the city's elite arrived. Ryan and Vanessa were already inside, smiling for photographers, their hands intertwined like royalty. Ryan wore his usual mask of confidence, but deep down, he was restless. Since the restaurant incident, Emily haunted him. The thought of her baby, their baby, had gnawed at his mind like a relentless echo. Then the doors opened, and Emily entered. The room shifted, conversations faltered, heads turned. In her sapphire gown, Emily didn't look like the fragile ex-wife Ryan had tried to erase. She looked powerful, serene, untouchable. She carried herself with quiet dignity, her chin high, her eyes unflinching. Even the swell of her pregnancy, once a source of humiliation, now seemed like a crown she wore with pride. Vanessa's smile cracked. "What is she doing here?" she hissed at Ryan, her nails digging into his arm. Ryan's jaw clenched. He hadn't expected this. Emily was supposed to remain invisible, tucked away in some forgotten corner of the city. But here she was, walking into his world like she belonged, her very presence a threat to the fragile empire he had built. As Emily crossed the ballroom, whispers spread like wildfire. "That's his ex-wife. She looks incredible. Is that his baby?" The rumors Ryan had fought so hard to suppress now came roaring back, louder than ever. Daniel appeared at Emily's side, offering his arm with a quiet nod. His presence was a message in itself. She wasn't alone anymore, and she had powerful allies. The sight of them together sent another ripple through the crowd. Ryan's stomach twisted as he realized people were already speculating. Was Daniel the father? Was Ryan about to be exposed as a liar and a coward? Emily didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to accuse. Her silence, her composure, was louder than any scream. She was no longer the woman they pitied. She was the woman who made the entire room hold its breath. Ryan forced a smile, but the sweat forming at his temples betrayed him. Vanessa's grip tightened, her eyes narrowing with pure venom. And in that charged silence, Emily finally looked at Ryan. Her gaze was calm, steady, unshaken. She didn't say a word, but her eyes told him everything. "You tried to destroy me, but I'm still here, and I'm stronger than ever." The gala was just beginning, but already the power had shifted. And before the night ended, secrets would be exposed that no one in that room was prepared to face. The gala reached its peak, a glittering orchestra swelling as guests toasted to wealth, legacy, and power. But beneath the music, tension simmered like a live wire. Ryan kept glancing across the ballroom, his jaw tight, his eyes betraying unease every time they landed on Emily. She had become the unspoken center of the evening. People whispered about her beauty, her strength, and most of all, her pregnancy. Vanessa sensed it too. She clung tighter to Ryan's arm, smiling too brightly, laughing too loudly, her insecurities shining through the cracks. "Ignore her," she hissed through clenched teeth. "She's trying to make a scene." But Emily wasn't trying at all. Her very existence was enough to unravel Ryan's perfect facade. At last, the moment arrived. The host invited Ryan onto the stage to deliver a speech about family values and the future of the Brooks Foundation. It was supposed to be his crowning moment, the night he solidified his place in high society as Vanessa's partner. Ryan straightened his jacket, pasted on his trademark confident smile, and took the microphone. The room quieted, expectant. He began with practiced charm, praising Vanessa's family, speaking of loyalty, trust, and new beginnings. But as he spoke, his gaze drifted toward Emily, standing tall, radiant in her sapphire gown, her hand resting on her belly. And then it happened. A voice rang out from the crowd, clear and strong. "Tell them, Ryan. Tell them about the wife you abandoned 7 months ago." The room gasped. All eyes turned toward Emily as she stepped forward. Her voice didn't shake. "Tell them about the child you denied. Tell them how you left me for her," she said, nodding toward Vanessa. Ryan froze, the microphone trembling in his hand. "Emily," he hissed, his mask cracking. "Not here. Not now." But Emily didn't stop. For months, she had carried humiliation in silence. "Tonight," she reclaimed her voice. "You talk about loyalty and trust, yet you humiliated me, discarded me like trash. You stood in this very city and let people believe I was nothing. But look at me now, Ryan. I am not broken. I am carrying your child, and I will not let you erase me." Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Reporters' pens scribbled furiously, phones lifted to record every second. Vanessa's face turned pale, her glamorous smile collapsing into rage. Ryan tried to speak, but Emily's words drowned him out. "You wanted to build an empire of lies, but this," she placed a hand on her belly, her eyes blazing, "is the truth. And the truth will outlive every deal, every dollar, every false promise you've ever made." The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan's carefully constructed image shattered in front of his peers. Investors exchanged wary glances. Society's elite whispered behind manicured hands. Even the orchestra faltered, strings screeching into an awkward stop. Vanessa ripped her hand from Ryan's arm. "You said she was nothing," she spat, her voice carrying across the hall. "You said she was weak." The humiliation Ryan once inflicted had come full circle. Now he was the one exposed, cornered, stripped bare under the weight of truth. Emily didn't wait for applause. She didn't need validation. She simply turned, her chin high, her dignity intact, and walked off the ballroom floor with Daniel at her side. Every step was liberation. Every step was victory. But as the crowd erupted in whispers and cameras flashed, Ryan's eyes burned with fury. He had lost control tonight, but one thing was clear from the venom in his stare. He wasn't finished, and his next move would be darker than anyone could imagine. The gala ended in chaos. Guests scattered in hushed clusters, whispering about the scandal they had just witnessed. Phones buzzed with texts and photos. Ryan Mitchell, the man who prided himself on control, had lost everything in a single evening. Inside the limousine on the way back, Vanessa's fury exploded. "You told me she was pathetic," she snapped, ripping the diamond bracelet from her wrist and throwing it onto the floor. "You told me she was nothing, but she walked into that room tonight and made me look like a fool." Ryan's jaw tightened as he stared out the tinted window, his fists clenched. "Don't overreact," he muttered. "Overact?" Vanessa's voice rose into a shriek. "Every camera was on her. Every investor saw you tremble like a coward. Do you have any idea what this does to my family's reputation?" Ryan turned sharply, his eyes blazing. "Your family's reputation? You think they'll care about one woman's outburst? They'll forget in a week." But Vanessa wasn't convinced. She leaned back, her lips curling into a cold smile. "You don't get it, Ryan. My father doesn't forget. He doesn't forgive weakness, and tonight you showed the whole world that you're weak." The word struck him like a slap. For the first time, Ryan realized Vanessa might not be the ally he thought she was. In fact, she might be preparing to abandon him the way he once abandoned Emily. Meanwhile, across town, Emily sat quietly in her small apartment. She had traded chandeliers and marble floors for peeling paint and flickering lights. But tonight, for the first time in months, she felt free. She had spoken her truth. She had faced Ryan, not with anger, but with strength. Daniel sat opposite her at the small kitchen table, his coat still draped over the chair. "You were extraordinary tonight," he said softly. Emily shook her head, exhaustion pulling at her features. "I was terrified." "And yet, you stood there," Daniel replied, his voice steady. "You didn't let him silence you. That's what matters." Emily glanced at her belly, resting her hand gently on it. "I had to. For the baby. They need to know their mother fought back." For a moment, silence settled between them. The hum of the old refrigerator was the only sound, but in that quiet something shifted. Emily realized she wasn't alone anymore. Not truly. Someone believed in her. Someone stood by her side. That realization was more powerful than any luxury Ryan could ever offer. But the night's events had consequences. By morning, Emily's name was splashed across tabloids. Ex-wife confronts mogul at gala, pregnant and defiant. Online forums buzzed with speculation. Was the baby Ryan's? Was Daniel secretly the father? Social media turned Emily into both a symbol of strength and a target of gossip. She tried not to read the comments, but a part of her couldn't resist. Some praised her courage, others mocked her. But none of it mattered as much as the message she received in the early hours of dawn. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number again. This time, the message was short, chilling. "You should have stayed quiet. You'll regret this." Emily's blood ran cold. She knew the threat was from Ryan. His pride was wounded, his empire shaking, and that made him dangerous. Daniel saw the look on her face as she set the phone down, her hands trembling. "What is it?" he asked. Emily swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's coming for me." Daniel's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening with resolve. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Then we'll be ready for him." But deep down, Emily knew Ryan wasn't going to attack in the open. He was cunning, ruthless, and desperate. And the next strike he planned would not just threaten her dignity, it would threaten everything she held dear. Ryan Mitchell sat alone in his office long after midnight, the city skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Normally, that view filled him with pride, a reminder of how far he had come. Tonight, it mocked him. He could still hear the whispers from the gala, still see the way the crowd had looked at Emily with admiration, and at him with disgust. His empire was crumbling, not because of a business rival, but because of the woman he thought he had destroyed. Vanessa's words still stung. "My father doesn't forgive weakness." If Thomas Brooks pulled his support, Ryan's projects would collapse overnight. Investors were already calling, wanting reassurance. The press was circling like vultures, and all of it traced back to Emily, standing in that sapphire gown, daring to expose him. Ryan poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hands trembling with fury. "She thinks she can humiliate me," he muttered. "She thinks she can take everything I've built." But he wouldn't let her. He couldn't. Ryan Mitchell wasn't just going to survive. He was going to crush her. He began making calls. First, to a tabloid editor he had in his pocket. "I want everything you can dig up on Emily Carter," he ordered. "Her past, her finances, her family. Find dirt or invent it if you have to. I want the world to see her as a liar and a fraud." Next, he called a private investigator. "Follow her. Every move, every person she meets. I want photos, videos, whatever you find, bring it to me. She's hiding something, and I'll expose it." But Ryan's most dangerous move came with the third call. He contacted an old ally in city politics, a councilman he'd once bribed for a zoning permit. "I need leverage," Ryan said coldly. "Pull her school records, her employment files. Make her look unfit to teach. If she loses her job, she loses her stability. And then she'll come crawling back, begging for mercy." It wasn't enough for Ryan to silence Emily. He wanted her broken, desperate, stripped of every shred of dignity. He wanted her to feel the same humiliation he had felt at the gala, but multiplied 100 times. Yet beneath his fury, there was fear. What if the baby really was his? The thought gnawed at him. A child tied him to Emily forever. And if the public discovered the truth, his image as Vanessa's perfect partner would collapse completely. That fear twisted into obsession. "If the child is mine," he muttered into the dark office, "then it belongs to me. She won't raise it. She doesn't deserve to." Meanwhile, across town, Emily slept fitfully, unaware of the storm Ryan was summoning. Daniel had urged her to rest, promising to keep watch. But even Daniel didn't know how far Ryan was willing to go. By dawn, Ryan's plan was already in motion. Headlines appeared online. Emily Carter's troubled past, the teacher with secrets, grainy photos from her old neighborhood, twisted stories about her finances, exaggerated claims about her health, all of it designed to smear her. Parents at her school began whispering. The principal called, hesitant but firm, requesting a meeting to discuss her future. Emily stared at the article on her phone, her stomach dropping. She felt the walls closing in again. She had fought so hard to rise, and now Ryan was pulling her back into the shadows. But this time, she wasn't completely alone, because Daniel read the article too, and his jaw tightened with a cold, dangerous resolve. Ryan thought he was the only one who could play dirty. But soon, he would learn that Emily and Daniel together were far more powerful than he ever imagined. The article spread like wildfire. By mid-morning, Emily's phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, concerned parents, and even old friends. Headlines painted her as unstable, unfit to teach, a woman with a questionable past. Every word was a dagger. She sat at her kitchen table, the screen glowing in her trembling hands. Shame threatened to pull her back into the darkness she had only just escaped. But this time, something was different. This time, she wasn't facing it alone. Daniel stood by the window, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice calm but firm. I want every legal resource on this, today, and prepare a statement. We're not letting her reputation be destroyed by fabricated lies. When he hung up, he crossed the room and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Emily, listen to me. This is Ryan's playbook. Attack, smear, control. But we're not going to let him win. Not now. Emily looked up, her eyes wet but fierce. He's trying to take everything from me again. My job, my name, even this baby. I can't let him do it, Daniel. I won't. That fire in her voice was the spark Daniel had been waiting for. Then we fight back, he said simply. The plan began with truth. Daniel's legal team drafted a press release backed by documents proving Emily's spotless teaching record, her dedication to students, and her community work. They released photos of her volunteering, testimonials from parents who praised her kindness and commitment. The narrative began to shift. Instead of a troubled teacher, Emily was portrayed as a devoted educator and a mother-to-be, standing strong against a powerful man's smear campaign. Next came visibility. Daniel arranged for Emily to attend a charity event, not as a guest in the shadows, but as an honoree for her contributions to children's education. Cameras flashed as she stood on stage, her gown elegant but modest, her hand resting protectively on her belly. She didn't have to say much. Her presence was enough. Reporters captured her grace, her quiet resilience, and headlines the next day read, Emily Carter, from humiliation to hero. But Emily wasn't content to let others speak for her. At the event, when asked about the scandal, she finally raised her voice. I will not be silenced by lies, she said firmly. My only crime was believing in someone who betrayed me, but I will not let that betrayal define my future, or my child's. The room erupted in applause. For the first time, Emily felt the tide turning in her favor. Ryan, however, seethed. Watching the coverage from his penthouse, he smashed a glass against the wall. She's twisting this against me, he roared. Vanessa, sitting across the room, only smirked. Maybe she's smarter than you gave her credit for, she said coldly. Meanwhile, Daniel introduced Emily to allies she never expected. Journalists willing to expose Ryan's shady business deals, lawyers prepared to counter his every move, and community leaders eager to rally behind her. For years, Ryan had believed he was untouchable. Now, every crack in his empire was being dragged into the light. Late one night, after another meeting with Daniel's team, Emily stood by her apartment window, gazing at the city. For the first time in months, she didn't feel small. She felt powerful. She rested her hands on her belly and whispered, We're going to be okay. Mommy's not afraid anymore. But just as hope filled her heart, her phone buzzed again. A new message. If you keep this up, you'll lose more than your job. Consider this your last warning. Her breath caught. This wasn't just Ryan's anger. It was his desperation. And desperate men were dangerous. Emily had stepped onto the battlefield, and now the war was about to get deadly. Ryan Mitchell had always been ruthless, but desperation made him reckless. The more Emily rose, the more he felt his empire slipping through his fingers. Every news headline that praised her dignity was another nail in the coffin of the image he had built with Vanessa and her family. Investors were whispering. Vanessa's father was growing cold, his support uncertain, and Ryan knew exactly who to blame. Emily. She had humiliated him at the restaurant, destroyed him at the gala, and now she was turning public opinion against him. He could not afford to lose. Not to her. Not to the woman he had discarded. Late one evening, he sat in his penthouse, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his side, rage boiling through his veins. He picked up the phone and made a call to his private investigator. I don't want dirt anymore, he said through clenched teeth. I want results. I want her silenced. Do you understand me? The investigator hesitated. Mitchell, that could do it, Ryan barked, slamming the phone down. The plan shifted from character assassination to intimidation. Ryan paid men to follow Emily, to shadow her late at night, to make her feel the walls closing in. Within days, Emily noticed the figures lingering near her building, the unfamiliar car parked across the street, the footsteps echoing behind her as she walked home. Fear clawed at her chest, but she refused to show weakness. Daniel noticed it too. One night, after walking her to her door, he caught sight of a man across the street who quickly ducked into the shadows. His jaw tightened. "He's watching you," Daniel said. "Ryan's getting desperate." Emily's hands shook as she locked the door behind them. "What does he want from me?" Daniel's voice was low, protective. "Control. And when men like Ryan lose control, they lash out. But we won't let him win." Despite his reassurances, the threats escalated. Emily received another message, this time with a photo attached, her walking into the school, her hand on her belly. The caption read, "Tick-tock, you're running out of time." Her blood ran cold. She clutched her stomach, terrified not for herself but for the child inside her. That night, Daniel insisted she stay at his penthouse for safety. "You're not going back there until we know you're secure," he said firmly. His home was vast, filled with security cameras and guards, a fortress compared to her fragile apartment. But Emily couldn't escape the feeling of being hunted. Meanwhile, Ryan's desperation deepened. Vanessa confronted him, her patience gone. "My father is furious," she snapped. "You've become a liability. Fix this mess or we're done." Ryan grabbed her wrist, his voice venomous. "Don't you dare walk away from me. You think I'll let her ruin everything? I made her, and I'll destroy her if I have to." But Vanessa yanked her arm free, her eyes icy. "No, Ryan. She's destroying you all by herself. And if you don't stop her soon, my father will." The words chilled him. He realized he wasn't just fighting Emily anymore. He was fighting to keep Vanessa's family from cutting him loose. So he decided on one final, brutal move. Late at night, Ryan's men cornered Emily on her way home from a prenatal appointment, grabbing her arm, their voices low and threatening. "You need to back off. Stop talking. Stop showing your face. Or next time, we won't just scare you." Emily's heart raced as she fought to pull free, terror flooding her veins. For the first time, she realized Ryan wasn't bluffing anymore. She stumbled back into the clinic, gasping for breath, clutching her stomach as the baby kicked in fright. Her tears blurred her vision. She had fought so hard to rise, but Ryan was willing to risk everything, even her child, to win. And Emily knew in that instant, if she didn't strike first, Ryan's desperation could destroy them both. The night Ryan's men cornered her outside the clinic changed everything. Emily had spent months trying to survive quietly, believing that if she stayed strong and dignified, the storm would eventually pass. But Ryan had crossed a line. His threats weren't just about reputation anymore. They were about her safety, and worse, the safety of her unborn child. She couldn't hide any longer. It was time to fight back. Daniel was the first to say it. Sitting across from her in his penthouse living room, his jaw tight with controlled anger, he told her what she already knew. "Ryan won't stop until you stop him," he said firmly. "And the only way to stop him is to take away the one thing he values most, his power." Emily's heart pounded. She had never seen herself as a warrior. But motherhood had changed her. Fear was no longer enough to keep her silent. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Daniel leaned forward, spreading out documents across the table. "Ryan's been hiding things, fraudulent deals, debts, bribes. My team has been digging for weeks, and we finally have enough to bring it all down. If we expose this, he won't just lose investors. He'll face criminal charges." Emily's eyes widened. "And Vanessa's family? Once they see proof?" Daniel said, "They'll cut him loose without hesitation. He'll be finished." It felt surreal. Just months ago, Emily had been a broken woman crying in a dim apartment. Now she was sitting with one of the city's most powerful men, planning the downfall of her ex-husband. But this wasn't about revenge alone. This was about justice. About protecting her child's future. They worked late into the night. Daniel's lawyers assembled files, timelines, and evidence. Emily contributed too, recalling Ryan's old habits, the late-night phone calls, the unexplained expenses. Every detail became a piece of the puzzle. She was no longer just a victim. She was part of the strategy to take him down. The next step was public exposure. Daniel arranged for a press conference, inviting journalists who had already begun questioning Ryan's sudden rise and unstable partnerships. Emily would stand beside Daniel, not as a broken ex-wife, but as a mother telling the truth. In the days leading up to it, Emily transformed once again. She practiced her statement, rehearsing every word until it was firm and unshakable. "I will not be silenced by threats," she said aloud in the mirror, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "I will not let my child grow up in fear of a man who abandoned us. The world needs to know who he really is. Daniel watched her progress with quiet pride. "You're stronger than you realize, Emily," he told her. "And once this is done, Ryan will never be able to touch you again." But Ryan wasn't blind. He sensed the storm coming. His investigator warned him that Emily and Daniel had been meeting with reporters. His paranoia deepened, his desperation growing with each passing day. One evening, Vanessa confronted him again. "They're circling Ryan. My father's already suspicious. If something comes out..." Ryan cut her off, his voice low and dangerous. "Then I'll make sure Emily never speaks again." The press conference was set for the following week. Emily stood ready, her speech prepared, her courage intact. She knew this was her moment to finally take back everything Ryan had stolen. But the night before the conference, as she packed her notes and tried to calm her racing heart, she heard a noise at her door. A slow, deliberate knock. Her phone buzzed at the same time with a new message. "You won't live to see tomorrow." Emily froze, her blood running cold. The battle was about to begin, and Ryan was prepared to end it by any means necessary. The knock at the door was slow, deliberate, each rap echoing through Emily's small apartment like a warning. She froze in place, clutching her speech papers to her chest. Her phone vibrated again with the chilling message, "You won't live to see tomorrow." Her breath caught. The baby kicked inside her, as if sensing her fear. Emily's eyes darted to the clock. 10:47 p.m. Daniel had insisted she stay at his penthouse under security, but stubborn pride had brought her back to her own place to gather a few things. Now she regretted it. The knock grew louder, then silence. Emily crept toward the door, her heart pounding in her ears. Through the peephole she saw no one. The hallway was empty, dimly lit. She exhaled shakily, convincing herself it was paranoia, until she heard the faint scrape of metal against the lock. Someone was trying to break in. Panic surged through her veins. She grabbed her phone, dialing Daniel with trembling fingers. "Someone's here," she whispered. "They're trying to get in." "Stay calm," Daniel's voice commanded, steady even through her panic. "Don't open the door. I'm sending security right now. Lock yourself in the bedroom." But before she could move, the door rattled violently. Emily gasped and stumbled back, clutching her belly. The lock held, but only barely. She heard muffled voices on the other side, men speaking in low, urgent tones. She ran to the bedroom, shoving a chair under the handle, her body shaking uncontrollably. She pressed the phone to her ear, whispering, "Daniel, they're going to get in." "Hold on, I'm almost there," he said, his voice sharp with urgency. The apartment fell into eerie silence. Emily pressed her back against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Seconds felt like hours. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow under the door made her heart race. Then, a crash. The front door splintered open. Heavy footsteps filled the apartment. Emily stifled a sob, covering her mouth with her hand. She could hear them searching, overturning furniture, opening doors. "Check the bedroom," one voice growled. She held her breath, praying for a miracle. Just as the doorknob twisted, headlights from outside flooded the window. Tires screeched to a halt. Shouts erupted in the hallway. "Freeze! Security!" Chaos followed. The men cursed and bolted for the fire escape, their footsteps retreating rapidly. Emily collapsed to the floor, sobbing with relief as the bedroom door burst open. Not from intruders this time, but from Daniel's security team. Moments later, Daniel himself rushed in, kneeling beside her. She clung to him, shaking violently. "They were going to kill me," she whispered. His arms tightened around her protectively. His voice was low but fierce. "Not while I'm breathing." Daniel helped her up carefully, his hands steady on her back. "You're not staying here another night. This place isn't safe. From now on, you're under full protection." As they left the apartment, Emily glanced back at the wreckage. The shattered door, the overturned furniture, the life she had fought so hard to keep normal. It was gone now. Ryan had crossed the line from manipulation to violence. Emily wiped her tears, her expression hardening. "He tried to silence me," she said through clenched teeth. "But tomorrow, I will speak louder than ever." Daniel nodded. "Then we'll make sure the whole world listens." But what Emily didn't know was that Ryan wasn't finished. The failed break-in had only deepened his madness. And by the time she stood at that press conference, Ryan would be ready with a counterstrike so shocking it could destroy everything she and Daniel had planned.